Joel Embiid is out of the playoffs. Giannis Antetokounmpo is out of the playoffs. Superstars are falling left and right this NBA season. What could that mean for the NBA going forward? What can it mean for the Brooklyn Nets especially? We're going to get into it all, but first, the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am Doug Norrie, the owner-operator, DFSR.com. If you need some projections for FanDuel, DraftKings, got you covered over at DFSR.com. There's a free trial over there always, so go check it out. Just check it out for a week. No big deal. Nothing to lose, a lot to gain. No Adam Armbrecht on the podcast today. Did want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go, this fast-paced game. Lets you team up with your friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. We did a quick scheduling thing where usually we record sometimes in the evenings just for the next day to have those podcasts out there at midnight Eastern for all you Locked On Nets fans, but wanted to just change it up a little bit here, waiting essentially for the game sixes in between the Bucks and the Pacers to end and the Sixers and the Knicks to end, because as expected, sort of, I thought that, that there would be a chance that we would see closeout games for both Indiana and for the Knicks, sending Giannis home, sending Damian Lillard home, sending Joel Embiid home, sending Tyrese Maxey home, and wanted to wait for those things to happen to talk about how the landscape of the NBA keeps changing, how it's going to keep changing for the Nets here, even in an offseason where they are not in the playoffs, as we all are well aware of. As as the playoffs go on, we're uniquely aware that the Nets are, hate to do a spoiler alert here, Nets aren't in the playoffs at all. But as we've talked many times, the NBA landscape, as it kind of continues to unfold during these playoffs, does affect, I think, sort of how the Nets will think about their future going into next year, and maybe even more specifically going into the year after. Because as things continue to shake out and some teams find themselves, maybe very far away from a championship this season, or even from the finals, or even the conference finals, it begins to change, I think, how certain players, i.e. superstars, think about their current situations, examine how their teams are now, examine how close or far away they think their teams probably are in the grand scheme of things, and then begin to think about sort of what the future might hold in terms of where they might end up being a few years from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, and which teams are best situated to maybe be a landing spot for some of these guys. And I think last night's results with the Bucks getting ousted and the Sixers getting ousted, you have to start looking at these players and thinking about how they view their current situations. And I think it's really, really fascinating, because we know that the Nets are, we don't know. It appears as if the Nets are gearing up for a 2025 summer push, that this 2024 season coming up upon us, 2024-25, is going to be probably very similar to what we saw last year's, maybe some changes, maybe some, few little contracts in and out here. But overall, as the Nets wait for maybe Ben Simmons' money to clear off the books, as they wait for the superstar landscape to unfold heading into that summer 2025, that this might be another sort of just wheel spinning year heading out to when we start looking at some of these big guys. But the first situation we'll start with here is Milwaukee, right? So Milwaukee's a fascinating situation. They end up losing in 6 games to the Pacers, and it really ends up not being close, right? 120-98. Pacers take care of business at home. I mean, honestly, it was crazy even went to 6, considering that Milwaukee played without Dave and Giannis in Game 5 and somehow won. Makes no sense at all, but no bother. Indiana goes home, closes it out at home. Cool win for them to move on to the second round of the playoffs. and then and we'll see what ends up happening there. But when you look at going back toward Milwaukee, who's, for our purposes, the way more fascinating team where it comes to this, is how they might view their current and future situation in Bucks land, where Giannis and Dame are concerned, because there's two ways you can look at this, right? For Milwaukee, and the Nets play into this in a big way, right? Especially with Giannis. You can look at this two ways. The Bucks look at this situation and probably like, okay, well, what was the expectation here? Giannis wasn't able to play because of the calf and Achilles injury. So he's not able to play this series at all. They still ended up kind of going 6 games somehow. Dame ends up sitting out game 5. Again, they somehow won that game. Dame plays, I thought, like decent, pretty well for this series, all things considered. They kind of hang with the Pacers, ultimately lose. But if you're the Bucks, you might say, and you're honest specifically, you might say to yourself, okay, let's look at this season. We got a new coach midway through, Doc Rivers, right? We did not like the coach before with Adrian Griffin. I was hurt in the playoffs, so it's like not really a testing ground for how good we can be. When those Dame and Giannis minutes when they played together were just like completely awesome. And so you might look and say, well, if we could just get us two together on the court at the same time, then it's going to be okay, because they're on-off numbers with those two together. We're completely sick. And you might say to yourself, okay, like let's, we got another year to try with this, and we'll end up seeing how it goes. Where the Nets play into this, though, is that if we go another season, or even like midway through a season with the Bucks where it's not looking good for some reason, they're already out in the first round this year. We already know there's been sort of like upheaval, around the coaching situation over the last couple of years. And most instructively for the Bucks is that if you look at their future prospects, I mean, it is looking rough. They have nothing. They have so many picks going out over the next couple of years. They really actually don't have any. They have very few of their own picks. I mean, they have picks going out to New Orleans for the Drew Holiday trade. They have swaps going out to New Orleans. They have stuff going out to Philly. They have stuff going out to Portland because of the Dame trade. I mean, these guys are down. I mean, they have a lot of picks, first-round picks with no protections going out over the next few years, right? Like 2027, no protections to the Pelicans, right? They have 2029 to the Blazers, first-round pick, no protections. Swaps to Portland in 2029, swap to New Orleans in 2026, 2025, they got a pick going out. A first-round pick. I know I'm kind of jumping around here. And then they have this year, the Pelicans have a right to a swap, but that's not going to be a huge deal because both made the playoffs. Regardless, if you look at where they are money-wise and picks-wise, you might say they could have a day of reckoning coming really soon here, where Giannis takes a look around and says, well, we can't really improve. Everyone's getting older. It's not really working. And now all of a sudden, you're looking at that situation's looking like there's just no chance it's going to get better. I know that everyone wants to talk about the Suns situation as being the bleakest. It's much worse than this because, at least the Bucks have, Giannis and Dame and they have, I think you can tell yourself a little bit of a story. But if you look at even in their contract situation, I mean, they're 182 into the cap for next year. They're 195 already in 2025. That's assuming Middleton picks up a $34 million player option, maybe close on that one. Maybe some of these options don't come true, but you got $68 million going to Giannis in 2025. You got $59 million going to Dame in 2025. I mean, these guys have a ton of money going out. They have a ton of picks going out, and they're now a first round exit out of the playoffs. If you're the Nets, I do think you're starting to perk your ears up a little bit and thinking, okay, maybe there's, we're talking about superstars who could shake loose. Giannis is for sure one of those dudes, for sure. Is it going to happen? I mean, I'm not going to say it's likely, but we know that this guy's shown frustration in the past. The organization bent over backwards to make things happen for him. It got him a championship. And, time kind of flies, and that's, what have you done for me lately? So Bucks are for sure a situation the Nets are going to want to monitor here over the next couple years. Next, we've got to take a look at this Philly situation as well as they get bounced out of the playoffs with Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and company. We'll talk about that here in a second. All right, before we talk about that, it's game off. Got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying, flagging the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. Got to give it to you more. In Monopoly Go, you're teaming up with friends for time tournament. You're working together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. There's so much to get. You can grab those unique stickers, trade with friends, complete albums for big prizes. They got cool new playing pieces. You travel the board with those. They got hilarious emojis. You want to taunt your friends. We all know what it's like in sports. Taunting your friends is sometimes just the name of the game. Plus, each Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure. They got a robot pachinko machine. It's all there with timed events to help you win big, massive multipliers for everything you win. Wherever those rent frenzies, there's always something fun to discover. A Monopoly Go get off the bench and go download it now for free on Google Play or the App Store. Monopoly Go, game on. All right, obviously the other situation here is the Philadelphia 76ers. Amazing series between the Sixers and the Knicks. Felt like it went 12 games, 13 games, really only went 6 games. Each one of them was like sort of like a borderline classic, especially with the last couple. I mean, just crazy stuff down to the wire. Obviously, with the Maxey game where he gets fouled early on, gets fouled near the end of the play. The Knicks make that crazy comeback. Then you go the opposite way where Maxey just goes absolutely nuts in game 5 and just somehow pull them out of the Garden to get it back to Philly. And then you get a game 6, which had so many ups and downs as well. It really was one of those ones where this first round of playoff games have not been all that intriguing. There's been obviously some sweeps. There's been some not so. There's been a bunch of blowouts, honestly. And really kind of series that were essentially foregone conclusions. You had to feel like this one was definitely not one of them. I mean, this was easily the best series of the whole first round. Might end up being one of the best series of the whole playoffs, although we still got a long way to go with that. But does send Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and the Knicks home and the Sixers home much earlier than I'm sure that they definitely wanted to, right? It's another early exit for the Sixers, another underwhelming year when it comes to playoff performance. And that's been a bit of wash, rinse, repeat here with the Sixers. Each year has had like its set of excuses, I would say, mostly around Embiid's health. That definitely factors into this one again. He didn't look 100%, although, he still played 40 minutes, dropped 39 points, 13 rebounds in game 6 here. Definitely looked, athletically and energy wise best in game 6, I thought. There was rough stretches. Game 5 was the fourth quarter was just a complete and utter disaster for him. It was one of those ones where his legacy is probably hard to kind of go all the way with this, but but to some degree, legacy was like saved by Maxey in that MSG game, because if the Sixers had ended up losing that game, his fourth quarter was so atrocious that would have been definitely the talking point. Definitely. He had so many turnovers. He had basically had a quadruple double when you throw in the turnovers as well, and some egregious ones too. Anyway, it doesn't end up being the case. Comes back, plays a much better game in game 6. Like I said, he ended up being like -2 for the game, but it was like that ends up not being so much of the story. So this one, from a game perspective, definitely could have started with this one because of just like how intriguing the game was and how awesome it was from basically start to finish. The Bucks situation, I think, is a bit more interesting in terms of future dynamics than the Sixers are, because I think the Sixers, their situation, while disappointing around what happened here in the playoff ouster, it's maybe less interesting going forward in terms of where the Nets are concerned, just because the Sixers have a considerably more outs than the Bucks do when it comes to improving the team. Basically, that's because they have nothing on the books for next year. Right now, they have a $51.4 million Joel Embiid. And that's basically it. We know the Tyrese Maxey extension is coming for sure here in the offseason. So I think that's basically a foregone conclusion. They have Ricky Council money. Obviously it's worth mentioning. And then they have not guaranteed money to Paul Reed, though the fact that he played in the playoffs here, I think we can probably assume that that's going to go through. But they really have nothing going in terms of money, which means they have an incredible amount of cap space to take guys in. I think you're going to see that happen for them to retool here this offseason. You could see Paul George being a guy from the landing spot here. And I think there's a number of different ways that they can go, that they could probably like just easily improve their team. Finally, the Tobias Harris money is coming off the books. He was awful in game 6. His line was so horrible in game 6 that it's almost comical. 29 minutes, 0 for 2 from the field, 0 points, $39 million. Like, it doesn't get worse. It just doesn't get worse than that if you're actually not hurt. A healthy guy making that much money, playing 29 minutes in a playoff game at a wing position, scoring 0 points on 2 shots is, I don't want to say it sums up the Tobias Harris kind of time in Philly, because he hasn't been like this. Like, he's been overpaid for sure. He hasn't been horrible. But this was such a bad performance in what will almost for sure be his last game as a Philadelphia 76er. His money comes off the books. They're going to get it. You would have to think they're going to improve this spot, just mostly because they're not going to have to pay this much money, and they're not going to feel like they have to play the guy because he makes so much money. I mean, these are the things that sometimes dovetail together. It's like one thing to not be living up to the paycheck, but also feeling like the paycheck has to determine what your minutes are. I think that probably ended up being some of the case with Tobias, although, they were kind of short on wing guys anyway after Batum, so maybe they just need his size and length at some point and just need to live with the non-results. Either way, Philadelphia, I don't think right now we're looking at a situation where Philadelphia is in a blow it up place, because one, there's nothing to blow up. Two, they have many more ways. They have things to blow up, like they could trade Embiid, but they have many, many more ways to like kind of get better for next year and the year after in really tangible ways. They're, they have their picks. They have tons of cap space. They have, an attractive landing spot with 2 guys who are really awesome in Embiid and Maxey, and a way to sort of probably reshape the roster around those guys, plus whatever they're able to get. So if this is a Paul George landing spot, I don't know, Brandon Ingram, if this is like kind of, they want to add a wing guy that can score and be a secondary scorer, there are going to be options for them here. And I think where the Nets are concerned, this one doesn't end up landing in the same zone as the Bucks, just because you have to feel like Daryl Morey is looking at the situation with disappointment, but not panic around getting rid of the dudes, right? They end up taking that game. And maybe one game would have been the big difference. If this is the game 5 exit in MSG with how horrible Embiid is, maybe we're just having a totally different conversation. For some reason, it feels a little different after going game 6, just because they were able to hang in a little longer. Embiid looked okay. You kind of feel like it could have gone either way. I don't know. Maybe it's really one game shouldn't matter around how we end up viewing a team in this situation does feel that way. Again, we're fewer than 24 hours removed from the game actually going down. But when it comes to the Sixers, they're just in a different situation. They have more to work with. They have more money to work with. They have more picks to work with. They have, they just have way more flexibility. And it didn't look good in the end when it came to like just losing to a Knicks team that I don't know, should they have beaten them? 6 games, every game was close. You could have seen the series go a different way for sure. But in general, I just don't see these two situations as being being in the same ballpark as each other. I think they both have the same upside. I would probably put like one season if I had to choose which team I would choose to just right now go farther next year. I probably would still just choose the Bucks, just because I think the Giannis Dame thing is just so real and just awesome. And I would hope that they can figure it out the rest of it. Middleton, those 3 guys together, maybe you were able to figure it out. Maybe they don't, they have Brook Lopez on for another year. The team's going to look very similar. So for 1 year, I think I would take the Bucks, but maybe that changes a little bit depending on who the Sixers are able to add in the offseason. And like I said, they're just so much better set up to make this work for them than the Bucks are for like the next 4 years, let's say, assuming Embiid is able to stay healthy. So 2 different situations. Started with the Bucks because I think it's a more interesting situation. Obviously, Knicks and Sixers was a considerably more interesting just overall series, but that's just sometimes the way the things shake out. Want to talk a little bit more how these things line up for the Nets. We'll do that all here in a second. But before we get to that, I'll tell you about our friends over at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Maybe you're into speed, power, style. eBay Motors has you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home the huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. All right, rounding things out here for the Nets. Obviously, this is I've mentioned it at the top, but this is an offseason. I think we're going to see probably very few marginal moves made by the Nets just because of like sort of where they sit with their whole situation. But I do think, as we'll have mentioned many times and will continue to, they are setting themselves up for this 2025 summer that is, I mean, maybe starting to look even better than we thought it was going to. I think that these playoffs are going to have real ground shaking events or effects on the rest of the NBA. This is a theme you'll hear us talk about many, many times over the course of this, definitely over the course of these playoffs and going forward. It's just the way, I just think this is the way things are shaping up, right? Like there's not only one team can win. There's a bit of a changing of the guard happening here. And there's going to be players that are just unhappy with their current situations and don't see many outs for how their teams are going to actually end up getting better, right? Like this is the other key to some of these superstar pieces is that when a superstar, these top, 5, 10 guys in the league, 15 guys in the league, start looking at it and be like, hey, they look in a year out and they're just saying to themselves, like, how's this going to get better? How are we going to improve? I just don't know it. I mean, I know with the Suns, Matt Ishbia, James Jones go up there and tell everyone that it's going to improve and get better. And then everyone with the realistic glasses on looks at it and is like, how? All this money, no picks, no way to get better, all the new cap rules, all the new CBA rules that just make things totally draconian in their way that they can kind of have no flexibility. It's just impossible to see. And these guys are, everyone has representation. Everyone has people talking to them. Everyone can just see it with their own eyes on the court and just look around and say, I just don't see this as being viable. And then you combine that with these younger teams that are now starting to come up that, you already have Denver. Then you got the Minnesota, who looks like they're kind of set up here in the short term. You got OKC, who's really set up in the short term. And then you have Boston, who, they're dealing with their own thing here, but that's a team that looks like it's going to be good for years. You start to look around and say, well, we got a lot of contention, and I might be on a team that's just not really set up to kind of do it over the next couple of years. This is I have to believe this is what Sean Marks and the Nets are really sort of sitting and biding their time for, is these situations to just have players get unhappy and just kind of want out. And maybe you can have them for, a ransom, but a ransom that's going to get you a superstar player. Now there's always context to this, because you could say to yourself, well, is that, if you're the Nets, is that even enough to get you really to where you want to be? The Nets would still be contending with those teams that I just mentioned a minute ago, right? Denver, OKC, Minnesota, Boston, and then whoever else is able to improve here also, because again, all these teams are looking to improve. I just said Philly has ways to get better. Looks like the Magic are getting better. Like there's teams that maybe only be like a move away now. And so the Nets are also going to have to contend with these teams. So you might say to yourself, well, knowing this, is this even the right path for the Nets? Are they even on the right timeline to be super competitive here over the next 4 to 5 years, knowing what we already know about the state of the NBA and the landscape in the NBA? I think that's a real discussion to be had. Something, again, that we'll talk about for a lot here is that, like, is this even the correct path, knowing what we already know about the NBA? Should the Nets even be doing this? They have the Suns picks. They have a couple Dallas picks. Should they just keep everything dry and try to reset the table here, because it's going to be hard to contend no matter who you get? I think that's a real question to ask. Now, do you want to be bottom feeding for the next 4 years? That's a tough pill to swallow. I get why ownership wouldn't want to do that. I get why Sean Marks wouldn't want to do that. It kind of sucks to do that. It's hard for the fans. It's not sometimes that exciting to watch. It's just, can Sean Marks really go back in good faith and say, this is what we're going to do? I can't imagine it is, right? Like somehow he's the only guy still standing. Everyone else has been fired. Everyone else is gone. Sean Marks is totally Teflon, so maybe he could say it, but it's really, really hard to imagine that he's able to go into this and say like, oh, we're going to do it. And I just don't think they want to. When you're GMing this way, you don't want to. And look, I'm not even necessarily making the case for it. I know we've made the case for it in the past. I'm not even making the case for it now. Maybe there are just enough high profile guys about to come free that it is worth it to take this tact, because you just want to be good. You have a chance to be good. Maybe maybe you're a rung below championship, and that's good enough. And I think there's real validity to that. There's only one championship every year. There's lots of ways to be successful in basketball without winning the championship. I think we're seeing that like for instance, from the Knicks right now, right? Are the Knicks going to win the championship? Probably not, right? But have they had a successful season? Oh my God, it's been so successful. It's been amazing. I mean, like Knicks fans wouldn't give this back for anything if you stop the season right now. And so there are ways to be really successful in the NBA without winning the championship. And then that's might also see that as a viable option, right? It's like, hey, let's just be good. Let's be entertaining. Let's get into the playoffs. Let's, be exciting. Let's have something the fans, let's have players like superstar players that the fans can come out every single night and see. You feel like a W is in play every single night. That's a real thing. And I don't discount that. I really don't. I think that, sometimes, once the expectations reach really high and you're not winning, then it's disappointment, right? But are there ways to after this season, would I vote for, 2 45 win seasons and play competitive first round playoff games? Yeah, I'd vote for that. That'd be so much better than just having the team be at home right now and talking about other teams and how things are shaking out. So I definitely get it. And I think that there are ways that the Nets are set up to make this happen over the next couple of years. And we might get another round of playoffs here that start to dictate how some of these other teams feel, right? I mean, I didn't even talk about Cleveland with the Orlando series because that hasn't gone off yet. We might be a Donovan Mitchell, not too far from Donovan Mitchell, being out of the playoffs earlier than he thought. I mean, it looks like they're probably going to get through this one. It looks like the Cavs are going to end up getting through this because they, as I'm talking right now, they lead 3-2. But you never know. The game's going back into Orlando. That team's fought really hard, and we might be a game away from that conversation. LA is, a game away from being eliminated by Dallas, right? So lots of stuff here that can happen. Still, the playoffs. I think they're gearing up to start getting a lot better from here on in. All right, going to get out of here. Much appreciated everyone that's still rocking with us through the off season. Look, we're here to talk hoops the whole time, playoffs, how it affects the Nets, all of it. It's all good, man. This is what we do. This is what's fun to do. And look, there's only so many teams in the NBA, so it all is kind of linked together in the end. Make sure that you subscribe over on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Like and subscribe. Those leaving those reviews really, really helps us climb up those podcast charts. As we get to the end, always remember that we're supposed to give a quote from one of the great American poets. That's going to just be another one from Mr. Adam Armbrecht, one of the great American poets who wasn't here today, but will be back with us next week talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.